Good morning and welcome back. We are on day 244 of our 365-day trek through the Bible. We are looking at the writings of St. Paul at the moment, and in particular today we're looking at 2 Corinthians 5 from the second half of verse 10 to verse 21. I'll turn you around so you can see what I'm reading to you. St. Paul begins this reading with a quotation. Each of us is going to get what we deserve, judged by the good and bad things we have done on earth. And then he continues, I remember how scared I used to be of such a judgment from God. And that's why we are trying to persuade people otherwise. God knows us intimately, and I hope we are all aware of what our consciences are telling us. I'm not trying to blow my own trumpet, but I would like to give you good reason to be proud of me. Then you will have an answer for those who pride themselves on their outward status and not on what they are like deep inside. If it looks as if we are beside ourselves, that's for the sake of God. And when we look as if we are in our right mind, that's for your sake. It is the love of Christ that is in control, now that we acknowledge that one man died for all, and so all are dead. He died for everyone, so that those who are alive no longer live for their own sake, but only for him who died and was resurrected for them. So now we have stopped looking at anyone from a human perspective. Yes, once upon a time I judged Christ by human standards, but not now. Anyone united with Christ is a newly made being. The old person is dead and the new person has arrived. This has all come about by God's action. Through Christ, he changed us from his enemies into his friends. Then he gave us the job of making other people his friends too. So, to summarize our message, by Christ, God was making friends with the whole human race. God never kept written records of people's sins. He has instead given us this message, telling them how he makes them his friends. So then, here we are speaking for Christ. It is like God is using us to make his appeal. On behalf of Christ, then, we make this plea. Let God change you from being his enemies into being his friends. Christ was sinless, but for our benefit, God caused him to share our sin, so that united with him, we are able to share righteousness from God. As a person who had once been very scared of God, Paul had a personal interest in this whole business of conversion. And it's not at all like the kind of conversions that happen in any evangelistic missions that I've seen. In those missions, it seems to me that the preacher is likely to spend a fair amount of time convincing people that they are sinful and need to do something to make reparation for their sins. They have to contribute to their own salvation by doing something, joining a church, going on a course, signing up to a giving scheme, going through some rites or ceremonies. Look at how different it was back then. How simple, how pure was the message Paul had been entrusted with. He says, so then here we are, speaking for Christ. It's like God is using us to make his appeal. On behalf of Christ, then, we make this plea. Let God change you from being his enemies into being his friends. Yeah, that's what he says. Let God change you. So, how have we got it so much round the wrong way? Why do we insist that ceremonies like baptism, confirmation, and communion are necessary? Why do we have to subscribe to creeds and regard only certain books as the word of the Lord? What appears to have happened is that these signs and symbols, which originally celebrated God's free gift to us in Jesus Christ, the deep desire of God to be our friend, have become instead checkpoints along the path to prove we are God's friends. And that's not what they were about. Nobody is going to hell because they have not been baptized or not received communion or not been able to understand the creed. It was all very simple. Once upon a time, Paul had been terrified of getting the relationship with God wrong in any way. Then God showed him something different. God doesn't want us to be scared. He wants us to be friends, to know him and love him, and to know that he knows us better than we know ourselves, and still wants to be friends, free from any angst about judgment. Well, that's a big message. Tomorrow, Paul shows us even more, this time about how to make the love God gives us into a desire in ourselves to love and help others. And I'll be very glad to see you tomorrow.